Today on English Hacks, we will finally learn why Susie sells seashells by the seashore, as we explore the S and Z sounds. Hi, I'm Josh, your American English guide, and this is English Hacks Pronunciation, where I help you to sound like a native and to understand natural American speech better. The topic of today's lesson is the S sound and the Z sound. S and Z. Of course, this is a pair where S is the voiceless version and Z is the voiced version where we vibrate our vocal cords. These two sounds don't always cause problems, but depending on your native language, they might. One thing to remember about these sounds is that even if your language has these sounds, there is likely a very slightly different placement which will create a slightly different quality to the sound. This is definitely a very small point that will probably not cause any problems, but potentially, depending on your native language, if you want to develop a perfect American English accent, which you don't have to, but if you do, this is a point that you might want to work on in the future. After bigger points like the vowels, of course. But so you know, the placement for these sounds in English, we have your front two teeth here. Okay, we have the top of the mouth. And there's this part that starts to go up here, more towards the middle of your mouth. Now the S in English, you're not going to be back here. Some languages do that, but the S in English is actually a little farther forward. If you were to close, bring the tongue up to close, you should be about in the TDN position in English on that bump. And of course we want a little bit of an opening similar to the TH sound, except instead of being here by the teeth, it's going to be up here, and the air is going to flow between that opening and the little bump there at the top of your mouth. Now this is important, because the SH, sh, and the ZH sound, j, is actually farther back. We're going to be talking about that pair of sounds next. The SH should not really have a whistle, okay? Shh, shh. Maybe a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of a whistle. But the S, see, it has more of a sharp whistle sound to it, instead of shh. So some of you will have to be careful about that and make sure that you work out the difference between these. One very important thing about the S sound is that it is part of what I call the bridge sounds. We're going to be talking more about this a little later when we talk more about linking. But the biggest, most common, important mistake that you want to avoid when you are using the S or the Z sound is be very, very careful. Just because something is spelled with an S does not mean it is an S sound. It will very frequently be a Z sound. This happens in many common words like is or was, but not this, which is an S. But it can also frequently happen after a voiced consonant sound at the end of a word. For example, seems starts with an S sound, but that second S is a Z sound. It is not seems. He seems interesting. He seems interesting. Or dogs, because G is voiced, dogs. So you really want to make sure that you are hearing the proper sound. Don't just trust the spelling. That said, the good news is that the S sound itself is spelled with the S. The Z sound itself is commonly spelled with the Z, but it might also be spelled with an S. So be careful. Let's look at some examples. First, S at the front of a word. See, 6, saw, so. In the middle of a word, possible, passing, Easter, mismatch. And at the end of a word, pass, case, house, least. For Z, we have Z at the start of a word, zoom, zero, zap, zeal. In the middle of a word, teaser, amazing, physical, example. And at the end of a word, please, is, was, phase. And a few examples that have both S and Z in the same word. Physics, sees, faces, Susie. Speaking of Susie, it's time for our tongue twister, which is the sentence that we started this lesson with. And we do have a little bit of the SH sound, but that's okay because, as I said, we want to make the difference between the S and the SH nice and clear. Ready? Susie sells seashells by the seashore. Susie sells seashells by the seashore. Susie sells seashells by the seashore. A very special thanks to our Patreon supporters. And thank you guys so very much for watching another English Hacks lesson. I will see you in the next one.